Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presented by CapTrust Financial Advisors. I would now like to introduce Deborah Gates, Manager, Advice and Wellness with the CapTrust Participant Advice Team. Go ahead, Deborah.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This seminar is being brought to you. We do these quarterly. It's brought to you for informational purposes. CapTrust, we don't offer any legal or any tax advice. As we always mention, that individual investors have individual needs. Planning for their retirement is no single solution that's applicable for everyone. It's also important to remember that all investing has some type of risk associated with it, and past performance is no guarantee of future results. So we want to thank you for joining us today in this session. So today I have a couple of guests with me. We are going to speak. I have John Meyer. John Meyer is our Chief Technology Officer here at CapTrust, and he's going to chime in a little bit on when we're speaking about credit and fraud prevention. And we also have Ken Carter, who's our senior manager in our IT infrastructure. And so these are my panelists. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ken, so much for joining me today. I think this is going to really be fun, and right now it's so needed with us being in the environment that we're in right now. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump in, and you guys jump in as well. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to look at, how do you define credit? And this term really has several meanings in the financial world, but one of the most common used definition is the credit refers to an agreement to purchase a product or service with the promise to pay it later. And the amount of money a consumer has available to borrow. And so we're really looking at their credit worthiness. That's also called credit. So, some may say that they have great credit, so they're not worried about the bank rejecting their mortgage application, while others may have some concerns. It's really important because it really affects your borrowing capacity. And so the importance of credit, I mean, in getting a loan, this is the most common use of credit scores. And, it's not feasible for most people to just save up enough money to outright buy a house, and a mortgage makes it possible to own and build equity, which is the fair market value of the home beyond the amount that you owe, without becoming cash poor. And so credit also allows you to obtain auto loans, student loans, or loans for other expensive products and services. You want to make sure you're buying insurance coverage. And insurers, they sometimes check to determine whether to cover you or at what rate. And they use insurance scores that are slightly different from the standard lending scores. Sometimes when you're securing employment, sometimes there are some employers that may check, they may do like a modified version of credit, and looking at your payment history, determining whether you're responsible, and if there would be any risk that you might bring to that organization. But however, you would have to give them permission to do that. Sometimes when you're leasing an apartment, or if you're buying a home, and you have to get utility services, sometime if your credit isn't great, then that's going to affect whether or not you have to put in a deposit. If you are getting a rental, I live in the state of California, and they want first month, they want last month, and they sometimes want a security deposit on that. So, you've seen that, haven't you, Ken and John, that, there are those times that you have to bring in all of that additional those additional things when there's questions, or there's some, what I like to call, a few blemishes on your credit history. So I want to talk a little bit about credit scores. So they're used to determine if you are really a good risk as a borrower. And so we all know that the higher your score, the better risk you appear to be. So you want to think of this when you're looking at your credit report, you want to think of this really as your credit reputation. And so a good or a bad credit score, that's going to impact your ability to get credit for certain purchases. Like I noted before, those big ticket items like a mortgage or a car loan. And it's also going to impact the interest rate that you are charged by that lender. So once again, the better that credit score, the lower the interest rate you may be able to secure. And so, you know that you have more than one credit score. And so, it's really a myth that you only have one credit score. In fact, you have several scores. So, as we know that there are three nationwide credit reporting agencies, and that's Equifax, that's Experian, and that's TransUnion. They're similar, but they're not, they don't use the identical formulas to calculate your credit score. Some use their own formulas, but credit scoring models, they generally take the same parts of your borrowing history into account. One model might focus on your payment history, another may focus on your total debt. The difference in focus may result in different credit scores. So there's the FICO score and there's the Vantage score. So the FICA score is the leading analytics company. Vantage score is a collaboration between the three credit reporting agencies, and that's going to provide a greater score consistency. So when you're looking at the FICO score, they're looking at five categories. So there's your payment history, that makes up about 35% of your score, the amounts owed, the length of your credit score makes up at about 15%. New credit accounts make up about 10%. And the mix of credit used, that makes up about 10%. When we're looking at Vantage score models, they use some similar categories, but they rank them by influence. So they're looking at payment history, which is extremely influential. So, what I want to add to that is you want to make sure that you are making those payments on time and really looking at your history so they can kind of gauge how you might act in the future as far as making your payments. Credit utilization, that's highly influential. And the length of your credit history. And the credit mix, that's highly influential. They also want to look at your debt to equity ratio. So, looking at how much debt you have and how much money you have coming in, that's also highly influential. The credit behavior, that's less influential, but the available credit is less influential as well. So just remember that everyone's financial situation is unique. And for those who are new and they don't have any credit, that's taken into consideration as well. So you definitely want to make sure that you're doing the things that can help your score and not hurt your score. If you look on this slide, you want to use your credit. You want to have a healthy mix of unsecured and secured debt. You want to make sure that your payments are on time. And you can pay off those balances, pay them off, and avoid those new applications. And I know, listen, we're about to go into this holiday season and you're going to go to the various stores and start shopping. And listen, I am preaching to the choir. So when you go into the store, they're going to ask you, would you like to get a store credit card? You can save another 20% or another 30% if you just sign up for a new card. And, I'm telling you, all of the major department stores, there's Macy's, there's Kohl's, there's Nordstrom's, there's all of those stores. They're going to try to get you to get a credit card. Tell them, no, I don't want to do that. And, the taking a discount, a 20% or a 10% short-term discount now can cost you thousands of dollars later on. So don't make a short-term decision on getting those credit cards that will affect you on a long-term basis. It's just really not worth it. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. And, so avoiding those new applications. And, we're going to talk a little bit about this in a couple of slides. You want to make sure that you're getting your credit scores and getting that information so that you can look to see if there are any errors on your report. Look to see if anything else has happened. So you want to make sure that you are monitoring your report. So when you get your report in general, what you want to confirm definitely your name, your age, your current addresses, make sure they're correct. Make sure that all the accountants' names listed are business with which you currently hold an account or you've held an account at one time or another, and that your financial information is accurate. If you find inaccurate or incomplete information, you can reach out to the credit bureaus. You don't have to call these companies to say that they can fix your credit and they can get your credit back on track. You can actually send a short letter to that credit bureau and you can dispute anything that's on your credit report that you are not familiar with. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. And remember that your credit report is not your credit score. Now, to obtain that, you can get all three of them, and you really should do that on an annual basis. And so you can either go on to online, go to annualcreditreport.com, and request your credit reports, and they'll send you all three credit reports from those three credit bureaus. They'll send that to you. I just had that done probably about maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, that I wanted to just review everything. You can call on the phone, or if you want to do, the old-fashioned way and you want to use snail mail, then you can actually go and send a request to Annual Credit Report Request Service. Go to that PO box in Atlanta, Georgia. All right. So saying all of that, why protect your credit? So in every other system in this country, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. Not so with your credit. So if a creditor has, all they have to do is say that you were late or you were delinquent in your payments, and it goes on your record. So it's up to you to prove conclusively that you were in fact not late. And if you don't have any proof, your creditor wins and then you lose.
And Deborah, I know we're going to go into this a little more detail later, but
Hmm.
unfortunately, the way the credit system works, if someone steals your identity, it's going to cost you time, even if you're completely innocent and you had nothing to do with it. It's going to cost you
Hmm.
time and money to clean that up. You may have to file affidavits, file a police report, track down documentation, hire lawyers,
Yeah.
potentially go to court. So it is a system where the creditors basically are right and you're wrong unless you can prove it otherwise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and your creditors can't be held liable, right? So there's no way they're going to know that you're a victim of
Wow.
fraud. It's unlikely event you can identify who that thief actually was, and chances are slim that you'll be able to actually cover those costs. The cost is time and money for you to clear your name. It's not refundable unless you have identity theft protection coverage. It's worth the effort to be cautious against it happening to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, some of the things that you can do, on the short term, in addition to reviewing and monitoring your credit report, you just want to take some of these necessary precautions to avoid becoming, we all trying to do the best that we can and not become a victim of identity theft. So, when someone steals your name, if they steal your address, your social security number, or other identifiers to make purchases or open credit card accounts, your ability to get credit is now at risk. So, in the past couple of years, identity thieves have even been, had been busy filing fraudulent tax returns and making off with tax refunds. It's ridiculous. So, John and Ken, tell me, I've looked at this slide a million times. What stands out most for you on this slide, and what advice do you offer? So, let's start with you, John.
Well, I think they're all important. I think they're easy to follow, but let me just focus on one of them, which is never providing financial information over the phone to a company you've not transacted business with before. And even with a company that you've transacted business with before, be careful. Just because you get a phone call from, Bank of XYZ does not really mean that it's the Bank of XYZ, right? When someone's
Hmm.
calling you, it's very easy for them to change their caller ID to make it look like they're anybody, the FBI or, the local police department. So what I would say is politely respond to that person that, hey, I'm really security conscious. Let me call you back, and then go look up their phone number on the
Right.
internet. Don't go to a URL they've given you. Look up their phone number and call that bank or call that creditor directly, and then ask to speak to that person who had called you. And that's a very common way to avoid, phone fraud. And I think the same thing happens with texting. You'll see people text you something and they'll say, this is Bank of XYZ, and there's a fraud alert on your account. Please click here to speak to one of our representatives. Don't trust it, right? Look up the phone number and call it directly, and you'll avoid a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I think I'll add to the other two areas that I kind of focus on are reviewing your bank credit card statements, you know, weekly, daily if you can, right? It's amazing how many people don't even look at that for a time period. And then when they actually go in, they're like, what is this? And at that point, it's been there for a while. And it's really hard to get back into the mix to say, can I work with my bank and find out what actually happened and where that fraud came from? The next one is set up transactional bank alerts. So every credit card now has it. You can have you set up on your phone or email where when you actually do the transactions, they will either text you, they'll email you, they'll confirm that you actually did these things. So you're fully aware at all times, and there's never a chance that you blindly log back into your bank or credit card statements and then find there's a transaction, especially a large one that you weren't expecting. So that's a good behavior to continue to do consistently.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's so interesting. A friend of mine, her car was broken into, and they had retrieved her purse, and she had those credit alerts and those bank alerts, so she could track them. You know, she'd gotten with the police and she could track every purchase that they made until she could get that account, get that stopped. But she was able to track them and see exactly where they were and how they were using her bank card, because she actually had those alerts on her phone. So those are really important. So that's another helpful tip that you might want to have. And so, those are things that we can do, and those are what I like to call low-hanging fruit. And so those are things that we can do on the immediate. What happens? And I'm so glad I have both of you here. What happens when it's beyond my control? What happens when I am with the company and there is a data breach that has happened? So can you talk about data breaches? Because we've been seeing more and more of those happening. So can you kind of tell us, talk about data breaches and what's that mean, and kind of address some of these latest ones that have happened?
Sure. So a data breach is when a service provider, usually a technology company, but it also could be a bank or a brokerage, as you'll see in a second, loses personal information, generally to a hacker. So it's not always to a hacker. Sometimes, they may have a bunch of printouts that got lost in an office move, or they lost a backup tape where they have a bunch of information. But generally today, you're seeing large scale data breaches where the firms that you're seeing on this slide have lost control of their information systems, and somebody has gotten in and been able to harvest a huge amount of data. So I'm going to talk about Facebook. In April of 21, there was a large amount of data, over 500 million people, that was made freely available for download. So it was about 20% of Facebook subscribers, which is hard to believe, right? They're covering the globe. And things that got compromised, included dates of birth, email addresses, employer information, genders, geographic locations, names, phone numbers, and relationship statuses. That's a huge treasure trove of data. So what happens with that data? Well, the bad guys get it, and then they use it to try and conduct email phishing campaigns, or phone phishing campaigns, or SMS phishing campaigns, to try and convince you that they know something about you, so that they can get you to reveal even more information. And so that's generally what happens with that information. And I always say, you can't change your date of birth, right? You can't change your name. So once it's out there, it's out there. And just so you know, it's not just Facebook. These happen all the time. So in March of 21, a company called Park Mobile, which is used to pay those parking meters in a lot of cities, the digital parking meters, they became aware of a security incident in some of the software that they used, and there were 101 million compromised accounts that included license plate numbers, email addresses, phone numbers, and vehicle nicknames. So now they know that I call my car Bessie, but all that stuff was accessed. And I mean, at the end of the day, that just goes into the attacker's treasure trove of data that they will try and use when they're trying to tell you, hey, there's a problem with your car Bessie, and it needs immediate
Right.
service. Why don't you come in and make an appointment? And then when you're making an appointment, they may get your credit card information, and you think everything's okay. And then the third one is Evite. Evite is used to invite people to events. It's a free system. They lost 21 million accounts, dates of birth, email addresses, phone numbers, physical addresses. So I guess most Americans are probably covered by at least one of those breaches. But if that's not enough, Ken's going to talk to you about three more.
Yeah, so the first one I'll talk about, I appreciate that, John, is Volkswagen. So I'm a really big car guy. And it's always sad to hear when car companies, end up on the same list as everyone else. And so Volkswagen in 2019 and 2021, they had issues, they were compromised, and it was all about sales and marketing information that a lot of people don't think about when they walk into a car dealership and they give out some of that information. They call you back, hey, are you going to qualify for a car? All these things. And so they had 90,000 accounts compromised, driver's
Wow.
license, date of birth, numbers, social security numbers, insurance numbers, other things that you put on a application for a car, or trying to work through that process, because it's a big investment to go get a car in the first place. And now it's sad to know that you are working with that company And then because of that breach, now someone potentially has all that information about you when you were just trying to get a new car. So another one on here is the Robinhood. So Robinhood disclosed the breach information of millions of customers, and this happened in recently in November 8th of 2021. It's a big data breach. It exposed information of customers. The hackers later determined or demanded a payment of money. And so they were trying to receive actual payment for that, saying, we'll give you information back to you, we'll show it, we'll delete it, whatever the case may be. And so there's lots of things out there where it's just constant, right? The hackers are always trying to find a way to get our information. And lastly, the MyFitnessPal. So that was an older one in February 2018. It was breached to a vulnerability in the security of the MyFitnessPal app on their server. 1.4 million affected accounts, individuals, usernames, email addresses, passwords, things that were fully locked down that you thought no one's ever going to have information. And in the email and passwords, people consistently forget. A lot of people use the same email and passwords across many domains and many different applications. And so that, just think about that when someone has your information, how bad that can be for you.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is that's sobering. But it makes us, you have to really be careful. So this is going to lead me into a polling question. So, how often do you change your password to your online accounts? Do you do that once in a while? Do you do it often? Do you do it annually? Never? We've looked at data breaches. I want to discuss, I want to take some time and discuss staying safe online. So, you know, looking at I want to look at these results. I want to give you a couple of seconds that you can go in and answer that question, because I know sometimes now at work I'm really consistently, because we're forced to make sure that we're changing. But I had to start thinking about some of my other personal accounts that I need to go in and start looking at it and making some changes to my password. So, can we see the results of that as to how often people are changing their password to their online accounts? Can we see that, Joy?
And Deborah, we do have the results up there. We have
Okay.
45% that say once in a while. We
Mm-hmm.
have 24% that say often,
Mm-hmm.
12% that say annually, and 18% that say never. And for you, 18%, you have some homework to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Wes. Thank you. So I have a question here again for both of you, Ken and John, because so much of our lives is online, especially now as we've gone through this pandemic. Um, I kind of want us to talk a little bit about fraud prevention and how that relates to cybersecurity, because, we hear the terms cybersecurity, we hear fraud prevention. And the second part of that question is I kind of want you to take us through and tell us what are some things that we can do. Here again, we're looking at that low hanging fruit. What are some things that we can do to stay safe online?
Deborah, those are really two distinct areas that people, I think, mix together a lot. So from our perspective, cybersecurity is how we maintain the information technology security controls to prevent people from getting into our systems who are not authorized, and to make sure that people who are authorized can only see the information they're supposed to, right? So our information security is important because it prevents us from being on that breach slide that you saw about, with hundreds of millions of pieces of information being stolen. Fraud prevention is related, but in some ways different. So a long time ago, we all used to get paper statements. If your grandmother left her paper statement lying around and somebody coming to the house picked it up and used it to call into some financial services company and try and get money cashed out, there's really no information security technology issue there, but there is a fraud issue. Somebody's trying to commit fraud by using information that they have to get money. Now, the oldest forms of fraud relate to paper things like paper checks. Those of us, who write checks know that someone can steal your checkbook and write a check. And, honestly, the banks are not checking signatures these days.
Right.
So they're related, but I would say that, many firms that you deal with in financial services focus on both, and they focus on them both heavily. So they'll make sure, for example, when you call up, that you can identify yourself. That's an anti-fraud approach. It's not a cybersecurity approach. They'll make sure that if you come in online, though, that your computer is being driven by a person, not by a bot. You hear that term, like, which is shortening of robot. So that's a cybersecurity control. And so they both work together to try and keep people secure. And I think as you look at what you can do as an individual, you can't make sure that the cybersecurity of Facebook is world class. That's not something in your realm of control. That's up to Facebook to do it, right? And it's up to Volkswagen and it's up to Evite. But what you can do is make sure that your cyber hygiene is really good. So the first thing that we would recommend is that you use a strong password for each site and you use a password manager. So if you're a Mac fan, you'll be using Keychain, and Keychain will generate passwords for you and will help you generate unique passwords for every site. But if you're a Windows person, you can use LastPass or OnePass or Dashlane, and they're all effectively super secure vaults that you can put a unique password in for each site that you deal with. And that helps you to not reuse passwords. And what I would say is, on the prior slide, when we did our poll, we went through the results, and some people change their passwords never, some people change them once a quarter, some people change them annually. I would tell you, if you're using unique passwords for every site, and they're strong passwords, which we'll go through in a second, you don't need to change your password, right? There's no reason to randomly change it from one really strong, super secure password for Gmail to another super strong, password for Gmail. That's not going to help you with the hackers. Now, if you get notice that there's a breach of Google, well, then you would want to change your password. So the important thing is to try and use those password managers. If you're going to do it manually, I always tell people, use the song method. Pick a phrase that you like or a song. So, do you remember the 21st day of September? You can use that song to pull key letters. I promised everybody I would sing, so if my voice is terrible, know that I'm not shy. That's one of my strengths. You can take the letters out of that song and you can build a password out of that. Now, if you want to, you can even add something related to each website that you're visiting so that you have kind of a unique password for every website. So you might, for example, take your DYRT21DOS ? And you can add on to that you're at Facebook, and you could put FB on there. So that's a way, if you're doing this manually, that's not as good as a password manager. What a password manager is going to do is generate something that looks like gobbledygook. It's really random. It's incredibly hard to crack. Cracking is when hackers use brute force techniques to use they use computers to try and break your password. But if you're not going to do a password manager, you'll never be able to remember a unique gobbledygook password for every site that you're going to. So you have to use techniques that aren't quite as good, but still better than what a lot of people do. If you go through breaches and you see the passwords that are revealed, they're almost always super simple things like duck 73 or things that aren't really all that random. So that would be my advice. Then the second piece is, if you can use multi-factor authentication, use multi-factor authentication. And what that means is you're going to get a text of a 6-digit code. In some cases it's 4, in some cases it's 9, but the industry generally has kind of adopted a 6-digit code that's going to come to you. That's extra capability for you to protect your login process, and that makes the login super secure. Microsoft has said that MFA, multi-factor authentication, is the best way you can protect your accounts. So, citing their own internal statistics, users who enabled multi-factor authentication ended up blocking about 99.9% of automated attacks against their Microsoft accounts. So 99.9, that's basically saying it's about 1,000 times better than not having multi-factor turned on.
Okay. And we want to make sure that we're not using the same password for multiple sites. So Ken, let's talk about, what else can we do for protecting our home and, our network, our personal computers? Because, when you're working in a company, like here at CapTrust, I know that you guys are taking care of everything here.
That's
But
right.
what about at home?
Yeah, so in a company form, most companies do a really good job of trying to make sure their computers are protected and taken care of. But everyone can improve. Every company out there, every user. And so first and foremost, I like to tell people, if you buy a new computer and you actually set it up, a lot of people will set that computer up with the default admin account as their primary account. That is like the terrible, because you just gave full admin access and admin privileges to your user account to do anything. So if someone gets into your computer or has that information, things can be installed by default, things can be put on the computer, and it's just using your authentication because you have full rights. So make sure we have a admin account and then set up a secondary account that is your user account, or one for your kids, a third primary account for them. So just have that isolation of admin accounts and who actually has restricted rights to actually install things and do things on a day-to-day basis. The next part of that is, and everyone laughs when we talk about this, is rebooting your computer, right? Do Windows updates, do PC, Mac, Windows updates and Mac updates consistently. So when they actually get pushed out, they're pushed out for the reason that they found an issue. A hacker tried to do something, found a way to infiltrate into the computer or into the software. And if you're not doing updates, you're not being patched to the most current standards that are out there. And so a lot of people forget that I should run updates and I should reboot once in a while. A lot of times updates require reboots, and some people say I have too many windows open, too many things open, it's too slow to reboot. Trust me, in the long run, it's so much better to actually reboot than not do it and have a problem down the road. Um, and then all the things some people forget about too is at home, let's say you have a Google Internet or Spectrum Internet or some branded internet, they'll send you a router, and that router default password is ABC123 or some or it just says administrator on it, right? You should change that password. You should not leave it out there, because every one of you and all your neighbors have now the same password to your internet or to your Wi-Fi they can get on your system. So it's best to go ahead and change that password. Set up different wireless networks. So I have one for my family, I have one for a babysitter, I have one for guests, right? Kind of separate those things out there so that I can restrict what that person can do when they're actually in my house as a guest, a babysitter, or someone actually visiting. And then the last thing is consider a mesh network. So there's a lot of software and a lot of companies out there have built these wireless mesh networks where you can put 2 or 3 devices around your house and actually will connect all those routers into one. So you have separated passwords, separate identification, who can use things. And then when you move around your house, you don't have to worry about what you're actually connected to. You're always connected to that same mesh network. It just helps kind of keep things cleaner and make sure that the appropriate permissions is delivered across the entire network in your computers.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing, we get so many emails, and everywhere you go, everyone wants your email address, and they're going to give you a 20% discount. They're going to send you a 10% discount if they get your email address, so they can send you different newsletters or anything like that. So let's talk about, what about that? About, clicking on those links and all of that stuff. What do you think about that?
Deborah, I think a lot of us do want to get offers in the email. We want to be, tied into our friends. Although email is used to communicate with friends a lot less than it used to be with social media. Just be really cautious about emails that have, offers that seem to be too good to be true, or express a level of urgency that's not really appropriate for email. So I always say, think before you click. Phishing is when bad people send you emails trying to get you to take some action that you might not want to otherwise take. So I think, look carefully at the sender address. If you don't know who the sender is, then, probably pass on that email. Look at the URLs that they want you to click on, and make sure that the URLs actually line up with the company that you're trying to do business with. And one of the funny things about the internet is URLs work kind of backwards. So when you go in there, you might see, xyz.americanairlines.com, right? You always start with the .com and you look at what's to the left of it. If you see American Airlines, that's American Airlines. But if you see americanairlines.xyz.com, that's not American Airlines. So it's probably, the internet is a little too complicated for most people, but I would say if you just focus in on that domain, you'll kind of know who it is that you're communicating with, and avoid the urgency. Now, I will tell you, if you switch to one of today's top tier email providers like Google or Apple, they do a really good job of blocking spam. And I think it's worth considering that if you have, let's say, yesterday's top tier choice of email, which might have been like AOL or Yahoo. The email services out there that are best of breed really do a good job of filtering out a lot of the malicious spam. It is hard to change your email address, I get it, but
Right.
I think it's really important. And while you're thinking about email, the same thing's happening with texting. So I think all of us get texts, this is, your favorite bank XYZ, and, please click on this right now. We've detected fraud on your account. Now, it may be, but usually when a bank sends you a suspicious fraud alert, they just want you to reply with one character. They don't want you clicking on a link. So you have to be really careful out there.
These are all so helpful, and I've just learned something from that with having that other, American Airlines.xyz.com. So I will pay attention to that as well. So just being a little bit more cognizant, we can't avoid everything, but we can. This is really just to bring some sort of awareness. So that you'll be just kind of think about these things and not, as John said, not be so hasty with clicking and just kind of sit back for a minute and think about it. That there's not that sense of urgency. What about, we love getting that happy birthday on Facebook. We love having all of our friends send us those little, emoticons and gifts and saying happy birthday. And you have like 700 people telling you happy birthday. Tell me about that.
So I think there's many parts of that, right? It's the first and foremost is don't reveal your real birthday. There's no reason why a social media or anyone else actually should have that, especially around social type of engineering and social type interactions. Um, it's like if you're working with your bank and you're filling out a report or something directly, okay, they're gonna want your real birthday, right, address or date that is. But it's really simple. So let's just say your birthday is in April, right? You can choose May, you can choose March, change the date by 1 or 2. They don't really need to know when you sign up for these social media type apps or a local gadget store or some other, fake thing where it's like you can tell that they just want your birthday to verify who you are, your age. You can put a fake date in there. It doesn't really matter. You're not trying to sign up for something for them. Another part of that is like, don't reveal your social security number. um, sure, if you're working with like your bank or the DMV, they're going to require certain things, right? But if someone's asking you for that social, always ask why, right? And see what their reason is. And I usually tell them, no, thank you, I'm not giving it to you. What other form of fashion can we move around that? So it's one of those things of there really is not many reasons for someone to have that information. Example would be Medicare is actually moving away from socials on ID cards. They're going to just a randomized number for you, so that way you don't have to actually have that on your card. People consistently, we tell them, don't carry your social with you when you're actually in your wallet, right? If you lose your wallet and your card's in there, they have a credit card, your social, probably your driver's license, your home address, your full name. So don't carry all these things with you that you can easily lose.
Wow. Good
Ken,
information.
Deborah, let me add something. I want you to know
Absolutely.
I have a Zucker Day, which is my fake birthday on Facebook. And, people will wish me happy birthday every year. It's always January 1, and they'll be like, happy birthday. And that kind of tells me who my real close friends are versus the people who are, fooled by my Zucker Day.
All right. So let's look here at, let's kind of talk about credit again. So what are some things that we can do, about like, what's this about freezing your credit? Can you kind of explain that a little bit more to me?
Sure, a credit freeze is an action that you can take to control who can pull your credit report. So if you're not looking for credit, there's really no reason why somebody needs to pull your credit report. If you're going to go buy a car, and you want credit, then you have to unfreeze your credit report. So there's really the three major credit bureaus, and there's this fourth group out there called the Novus. They all have a mechanism for you to put a temporary freeze on your credit, which means that nobody can see what your credit report looks like without you authorizing it. So it does require you to go to each of their websites, and if you Google, credit freeze Equifax, it'll take you to the right place, and they're going to have you create an account, and then you'll be able to basically freeze or unfreeze your credit at will. So it pretty much requires that you do it online. But before you go shopping for that new car, or before you try and get a new credit card at any of the retailers that you mentioned, Macy's or Belk's, you have to go and unfreeze it if you want to get a new credit card. So a lot of us kind of know when we want to get more credit, and there really isn't a great reason for your credit to be just open, but it does add a little bit of a barrier there. A novice is a little different in that they also are used by banks to see if you are what they call debit worthy in the industry, which means are you a good risk to have a checking account? Are you a good risk to have a debit card? So, generally not pulled quite as much, but pretty easy thing to freeze there as well.
Okay. So let's talk about, can you talk to me about credit monitoring, that versus identity theft protection, and how that works out?
Sure. I think the separation of the two is as simple as someone is actually monitoring. And so, there's a lot of, I would say, credit cards and banks that will have a monitoring service. Usually it's free or a small paid service. They kind of keep an eye on your credit. They'll send you either weekly or monthly updates of what's going on and actually tracking that. And of one or two reports, they'll email you and say, how's this look? That kind of just a good tracking solution to kind of monitor it. The identity theft protection, there's many versions out there. I'm not going to drop any names for promotional reason, but there's a lot you can choose from. And with those, it's a paid service. They go in there and they're really looking for, has your information been compromised, right? Has your information been, on the dark web? Has it been put out there?
Mhm.
Has someone logged in as you? Is there multiple accounts with the same username and passwords? Like, they're trying to track that information. So if you're a user that has one email address with one password for everything you do, they will see that and alert you and say, hey, you should change these things. Or, hey, you have an account at blank credit card and there's been a data breach. You should go ahead and work with that credit card or change information or check your account. So a lot of it is, they're really going into helping you identify and managing the risk more in depth than just a monitor.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I think we you want to visit your accounts on a regular basis, right? Especially looking at all of your accounts. Your retirement account, your bank account, your any other accounts, your utilities, any other accounts that you have, your investment account, all of that. You want to make sure that you're doing that. So kind of like claiming your online identity, at least kind of review it on a monthly basis. You don't want to when was the last time you went into your retirement account? You don't want to say that you went in there like last year. You want to make sure that you're revisiting those accounts, your bank accounts, and all of that. So tell us, I mean, we're here at CapTrust. So, you know, tell us about our security system. I mean, we have some, information. So what about
Sure.
our security?
So I think this is something that John and I can both speak to. We'll kind of go into it, but our email security, top priority. We consistently do phishing campaigns for our own employees. We're trying to verify, making sure that they're not clicking on things like the American, xyz.com, encrypted emails and how they actually flow to make sure that's safe for our employees. Making sure that if it is a bot or something saying something, we try to restrict it from even getting and delivered to the employee. Targeted threat protections, limit the number of phishing campaigns coming in from external also. So we are consistently always monitoring our emails, verifying what's going on, and trying to help prevent our employees from making a simple mistake that then affects actually the company CapTrust itself. We have firewalls, server access. So there's a big part of, there's multiple divisions of CapTrust and technology. So with that being said, one of the divisions that kind of falls under my tutelage is the server team, right? And so they're consistently updating and making sure things are taken care of, making sure that there's no threats or issues, or if there's a Microsoft 0-day push out, that we're fixing those things as quick as we can. And just trying to make sure that our infrastructure is as solid as it can be, because you never know when that next person is going to go ahead and kind of attack us.
Yeah.
In addition to what Ken said, we use advanced encryption standards on all of our devices. So, mobile devices and non-mobile devices. In case a device is lost or stolen, we have, restricted access to client information based on the employees who need to access it to conduct their business. We use some pretty advanced endpoint security solutions which protect our computers against viruses and malware. And I think most importantly, we have ongoing monitoring to make sure that we are looking at what's going on in our network. We do annual testing to make sure that these security controls are effective, and it lets us see if there are any potential vulnerabilities. And we do that testing with external parties. That's all they do. So they're very focused on trying to crack into our systems, and we love to repel them. And we get better and better at it every single year. And finally, if things go wrong, we have business continuity and disaster recovery plans that give us the procedures we need to follow if we have some kind of business disruption.
Wonderful. Yeah, we saw that. I saw that a couple of times, how we were able to keep going.
And
Um,
Deborah, real quick,
yes. Mhm.
for you, the participants, we're never going to ask you information like personally identifiable information in order to provide you advice. We are trying to only have the information we need to give you the advice that we need
Absolutely.
around your investment. So I did want to throw that out there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Wes. So I want to get to some questions. So what, your next steps are, you want to review your credit report. You want to stay safe online, and you want to contact CapTrust, and then we can always help you. You want to make sure you're doing that, and you can, contact us directly, calling us on the 800 number. We have some evening appointments available. You can go on to captrustadvice.com and set an appointment. I'm going to leave this slide up so that you can take that information down. And remember, you're going to get a copy of this recording. But Wes, I'm sure that the question box they're filled. What do you have for us?
So yeah, we have been getting a lot of questions, and we're going to try to get through as many as we can with our experts here. And hopefully, you've got a lot of great information from this today. John did point out that name is actually personally identifiable information, but we're not asking things like your logins, your
Right.
social security numbers, things like that. So again, what's needed to be able to just simply provide you advice as part of this offering. Deborah, first I'll come to you, and I had some
Okay.
questions about closing accounts and the
Mhm.
impact on someone's credit and credit score. Some people have said, hey, I've opened all these store accounts because they offered me some greatest discount for opening it, and I've got all these cards I don't use anymore. So talk a moment about closing accounts and when you may want to, when you may not want to.
So it depends if you think you're going to use those credit cards at some point. What I would say is that you want to have the major credit cards that you can use at any store, as opposed to having those individual credit cards, because you want to look at what is the interest rate on those cards. And if you're holding those credit cards, sometimes that may count against you for having a number of credit cards open. And then there's a question, they go, why do you have all these credit cards open and you're not using any of these credit cards? Why do you have them there? They look at your debt to equity ratio. So what's your income? What equity do you have? Your income coming in, and how does that compare to the debt that you have? So, keep the major credit cards. And if there's some store that you frequent often, then you might want to keep one or two. But those individual credit cards to those different stores, I would get rid of those accounts.
Yeah, especially if you aren't using them. And some cards you pay fees to have. You have to weigh.
Absolutely.
You have to weigh. Am I paying a fee, and is that fee worth it? But again, sometimes long cards you've had a long time really can help your credit. So again, you have to weigh those decisions kind of individually. So to my tech guys, we'll throw you guys a question. A lot of questions about password managers. And some have asked about using like the services through like Chrome, and is using the systems through Chrome and having it pre-fill or fill in your passwords. Are those safe? Can you talk about again briefly those password managers? Are they safe, like the Chrome ones, and also the services that come up with those hard passwords? Should I use those recommended passwords if it's being offered?
Two really good questions there. So with regards to whether or not you should store passwords in your browser, my answer is always no, because if somebody gets onto your computer, they're going to then be able to get into everything else. So it's risky because the browser really isn't protected. It's not asking you for for like multi-factor authentication before you go into it. So if someone gets onto your computer, then they're going to be able to get to all your passwords. And in most of those browsers, there's actually a setting where you can actually see all the passwords. So I would say not my preferred way of doing it. And then Ken, I'll let you address the second question about the randomly generated passwords that come out of any of these solutions.
Yeah, I think that's the preferred method, is that you go ahead and use a service that actually will allow you to log in. You create hopefully a decent long cryptic password for that account, and then in that account they have plugins into the URLs for browsers. And then when you actually create that go into, let's say, log into Gmail, for example, you actually have an option to say generate a new cryptic password. It's a password that you will not remember. It's super long. It makes no sense at all, but you can have a different separate password for every single account you log into. That is the preferred method that we will suggest for anyone out there. And there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, a lot of companies out there that are offering these solutions. I suggest you kind of just do some digging and kind of look at some of the reviews and figure out which one is the best one for you to utilize.
Yeah, I think there's no question that the randomly generated passwords are far more secure than the passwords people make. People make passwords that are usually like a couple of words with a number thrown together and an exclamation point, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not nearly as random as what these things will generate. And randomness is what makes the password really secure.
I agree.
Deborah, next one's for you.
Okay.
An individual asked about what's the best way to pay off, debts. Should we pay off lower or higher balances first? How are some of the ways we can
Sure.
attack the debt that we have to hopefully improve our credit over time?
Absolutely. So it's kind of twofold. You want to look at those, if you have debt, if you have credit cards, you want to look at the interest rate and you want to pay off those high interest rates first. Now, and so you want to put as much money as you can to that higher interest rate, and then on the other credit cards that you have, just try to pay the minimum just to keep it, so that you're not late. So you pay the minimum on those, pay a little bit extra, pay off that one credit, get that credit card paid off. Once you get that credit card paid off, you take that money. It's like the snowball. You take that money, then put it on your second highest interest rate, and then you get that one down, and you just keep going with that until you paid them off. If you can pay, if you have enough where you can do that simultaneously, where you can do a couple of them at the same time, that's ideal. But if you can't, then you just try to take them one at a time, and it may take some time to do that. Uh, but the time that you take to paying off that debt, it pales in comparison to the benefit of not having that debt in the long run. So you just have to you just have to be patient and set aside that time and say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to tackle it. And you have to be consistent and don't add any more debt. So it takes a lot of discipline. I mean, when you have credit cards, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline to make your payments on time, and it takes a lot of discipline to make sure that you're using credit wisely.
So we've had some questions on kind of protecting yourself when you're traveling, like some of you may be doing currently. So, uh, when you think about traveling and using the Starbucks Wi-Fi or the hotel
Mm.
Wi-Fi. So, any thoughts on that, John or Ken? How do we protect ourselves when we travel? Because we still need internet access.
I think there's two parts of that. I think the first part is, what do you have on your computer to protect yourself to start with, right? Do you actually have some kind of, VPN type solution on your computer that's actually locking down your traffic to what you're actually doing? So is it a work computer or is it a personal computer? If you're on a personal computer and you don't have anything protecting that computer and you're on a local Starbucks or some, open internet, then somebody could be spoofing or mimicking a wireless device out there and actually tracking what you're doing. So I think that's an thought process, is how is your own computer you're utilizing and how that actually functions. Most cell phone providers now actually offer hotspotting. So you're actually doing it through your own type device and actually not utilizing open network. And that's a thought process. A lot of it is just that change of what computer device you're using, how are you using it, and what information you're actually, transpiring on that device.
And then, John, can you explain, what is multi-factor authentication? Had some questions about multi-factor authentication. What is that, and how do I use it?
Sure. So you'll hear it described as either multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. And so two means there's two different ways of you identifying yourself. Factor basically, is the is the fact that you have a second device that's being communicated with for you to sign into a different application. And authentication is just a fancy word for signing in. So what it basically is whenever you sign in to, let's say, your Gmail account, Google can see that you've never signed in from that device before, and they'll send you a prompt to have you verify that you are actually signing in. That's multi-factor authentication. That form that they send it to you in can be an SMS, or it can be what's through something called an authenticator. An authenticator is a better way of doing it. That's how Google does it natively on their mobile phones. But the text is better than nothing, right? So what you're basically doing is getting another code that's unique for your login event, and you're putting that code into the login process, and that helps confirm that it's you who's signing in, not a person in another country. Really super important that you have multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication enabled for your email. So Google's making it mandatory with Gmail. You won't have a choice anymore. The reason why it's so important is if a bad guy can get into your email, he or she can reset your passwords everywhere. And basically almost all password resets flow through your email. You'll get a message that says, click on this link to reset your password. Bad guys will take over your accounts and they will delete that email, so you won't even know, and they'll do it while you're sleeping, right? So you've got to really have control of your email if you want to have control of all of the services that rely on email to do password resets, which is almost all of them. So I think MFA, multi-factor authentication, or two-factor authentication is critical to protecting your email, and you should be using it with every bank, every financial services company that you're doing business with. Yes, it's a little more difficult to sign in, but boy, the security is just that much better. And if you get a prompt in the middle of the day that where you get like a 6-digit code sent to you and you didn't ask for it, that means
Right.
Somebody's trying to sign into your account. So it gives you a clue someone's trying to hack into your accounts.
Yeah.
And then we'll go a few more minutes, just, since we did start just a few minutes after the hour. I had some questions about, if I belong to a credit monitoring service, should I still look at my credit reports annually? And I'll real quick do this. Yes. Yes, it's
Absolutely.
being monitored, but you want to review. And some people will get those three from the different agencies all at once. Others will spread them out throughout the year. Let me check one early on, one mid-year, one towards the end of the year. I also had some questions from younger individuals. I don't have any credit. Should I be monitoring it? Yes. You want to make sure no fraud is going on
Right.
before you have even gotten started yourself. Deborah, real quick, the impact of paying off loans early. I've taken loans, will paying them off early or faster than I'm required have an impact on my credit? What are your thoughts around that?
No, that's just going to help you. That's going to help you build your credit. And so then creditors will see that you're paying off your credit cards. The only time where there might be like a prepayment penalty for paying off early is if you have a mortgage. But if you have credit cards, then you can pay those credit cards off early and there's no ramifications for that. If you have student loans, try to double up those payments and try to pay that off as soon as possible. And that actually helps your credit. It shows a creditor. It just really builds your reputation as a person that's trying to get credit.
So one last question on the tech side of things, and we've gotten some questions of what makes these password managers secure. What's to prevent them from getting, the bad guys getting in there and getting all my passwords. So any thoughts on that?
Sure. Usually the password managers take special care to not put information on servers, or to put it on a server in a fully encrypted form such that nobody can decrypt it without having a super long password that you provide to them. So the key is you're going to come up with a really long password to use with your password manager that only you know, and every bit of information that's stored somewhere else is all fully encrypted based on that password. So it's very difficult for someone to crack that. So you're not going to see that there's a breach from one of these major password managers where people actually got a hold of passwords. And then all of them support multi-factor authentication. So before you get into your vault, it can prompt you and make you say, yes, this is really me trying to get into it. So I think that's a lot better than what you typically see with let's say, your browser, where there's really no control. Once you get on the computer, you can get into the browser or other techniques. So I would say in the world where you have multiple passwords, it's the best thing that people have invented yet.
And the benefit of that is, do you want to have a little bit slower login period, or do you want to lose all your information to someone that
Right.
changes the effect of your entire life down the road?
And with that, I think that's a good segue to wrap up. We will send out the recording in the next few days, so be on the lookout for that. It'll include some other articles. Captress is here as part of your benefits, here to help you with your retirement and other financial goals as well. This is part of your benefits. Call us, set an appointment, and we'll call you at that scheduled time. Deborah, John, Ken, thank you so much. Any last minute comments for our group here today as we wrap up?
Thank you so much for coming to this presentation. I think that that is a wealth of information that you received today, and sometimes you might have questions after you've listened to a webinar like this. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to us at CapTrust. We are waiting to hear from you, and we enjoy having these conversations with you, and about your plan and about these other subjects. And I want to thank John and Ken for coming and taking out the time. Listen, I have to tell you guys that both of them, they're traveling today. They took out the time to be a part of this presentation. I think, Ken, you're in Oklahoma. John, you're in Texas. I mean, you guys have been traveling all week and handling other business. So thank you for taking out the time to actually sit and give us this information that was simply invaluable.
You're welcome.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us, Deborah.
And so, with that, I want everybody to enjoy the rest of their week. Stay safe and remember to stay safe online.